Today on the Divorce Doctor podcast, I have the honor of interviewing Laura Sprinkle, my dear friend. Laura is an affiliate partnership strategist who specializes in working with digital course creators. She also hosts the Laura Sprinkle Show, which is an amazing podcast helping people thrive through business. She's the co-author of a best-selling anthology and the author of 2 books, one about gut health and one a children's book. She lives in Portland, Maine with her daughter and is happily divorced. Laura, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your experience.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait.
I'm so happy. So I like to start off by asking to kind of think back a little bit and see if you can remember when you first started considering separation as an option for you.
Yeah, that is such an interesting question. And I feel like what I want to say is that I don't know that it was ever not an option, if that makes sense. Like it was something that I feel like, I'm not saying, oh, I got married and then immediately I was like, we should separate. But I feel like there was always this like little nugget of, is this really right for me? Kind of in the back of my mind. And then I didn't really take it seriously until the moment when I really asked for it. I didn't really know I was going to even ask for it. I kind of just said, I think we should take a break. And then I couldn't stop smiling and realized that that was the direction that things needed to go.
Wow. What amazing connection to your body and your experience, right? That like your body was actually saying, yes, this is what I want. And I'm so glad you said that it was there kind of hovering is the word I'm going to use. I think a lot of people have that experience. And did you have the experience of trying to kind of shoo it away a little bit and push it away and then it would kind of keep coming back? Can you share a little bit about that?
Definitely. Yeah, it was like, it was never off the table, which I guess sometimes I think about, is it ever off the table for anybody, like mentally or emotionally, and kind of wondering, you know, as I venture into new relationships now and just one, I mean, this is a question for you. You know, I know you are happily remarried. And so like, I'm not saying like, oh, do you ever think about separating your current partner? But like, is there ever, like, do you still have doubts, I guess, going into the new experience? And does it feel different, the level of commitment and the level of not having those thoughts? That's my question to you.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And I think the difference for me now is that if I have any doubts or any questions, I quickly put the focus on me and what's going on for me that I'm having those questions rather than, is there something about him that I'm having questions about?
Yeah.
Right. Because that's some of a big piece of what I teach is that we can't change another person. And so if I understand why this situation is triggering me, or if I understand why I'm feeling this way, then I can make the right adjustment. And the adjustment might be to leave the relationship, but it starts with what's happening for me, because we can get so obsessed with doubt, right?
Totally, for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Yeah, looking back on things, I mean, it's so easy, of course, to see like, oh, that was a sign, and oh, that was a red flag, and oh, da 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 da. But like, it's hard to know that when you're in the moment and really what that means. And yeah, we did have conversations like, oh, this is pretty quick, and even I mean, we knew each other for a long time beforehand, but yeah, I mean, it's just so fascinating to think about relationships and
right. And how they can be, we do have a real prescription for it, I think, in our culture that does not fit what really it means to bring 2 dynamic people with different histories and different needs and different experiences together. And so I love this idea of also just considering doubt as part of the process versus a sign that something has to end. And even the idea of taking a break, Laura, so it sounds like that came from you. And even putting that out there was so brave and so, flexible of your thinking, because a lot of people, I think, wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. So how did that come about? And would you recommend that to people who are the break idea?
The break. Yeah. Well, it came obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but it was a really hard moment. And it was a moment of like, I don't know how we're going to move forward and I had binge watched, do you watch Red Table Talks at all?
A little bit.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
watched the episodes where they're talking about Will and Jada's relationship, and I don't know if that's where the idea came from, because ultimately I know that they stayed together and they may have taken a break, and I don't know if
I
that's where I
think
got the
so.
idea from.
Right.
I do think I said it not thinking that, oh, this is going to end in divorce. I didn't even, yeah, I just didn't know. I just kind of said it. I'm just like, I need to, it was more like, I love what you said about it's not really about the relationship or even about him or the other person. It was really like, I am freaking out on the inside and I need time to even know who I am and what I want. That is why I need this break. I have no idea how it's going to result for us, but I just need to like get clear for myself of like what the flippity flop I want. I've been using that as my swear word a lot. So just
You
so
tell
you
you
know.
have a 2-year-old child.
so yeah, so it
Yeah.
really was like I just need, yeah, I
That's
need
so
to figure
great.
things out.
It's so good, Laura, that you're bringing this up, because I think a lot of people feel very, especially when they come to see me, very black and white about, are we are breaking up, and is it a divorce, or are we staying together? And for a lot of people, those two options feel really heavy. And so this middle ground of the break, of really taking some time to figure out how I feel, we don't even have to put labels to it. I just want to notice what I feel like in this break is a really, really good tip. And so you noticed that you were smiling a lot. So what
Right.
did that tell you?
Well, it told me that the break idea was super important, that I really needed to follow through on it and not, because it, we were actually on a trip at the time when I said it. And so it could have been easy to get home, fall back into routine, all of that. So, I mean, it did take some, it's easy to say and then it's harder to do. So
Yeah.
it did take some like, no, it's different. Like we really are on a break. Even though we live together, we're not like doing that.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit? Because I know a lot of people that I work with have this, where you're still living together in this, we call it the limbo period. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, like, did you set boundaries? Like, how did you manage that? If you could share with some people about the
Yeah,
details.
I remember when I first said it, we kind of worked out. And so we have a daughter, which I know you said at the
Yeah.
beginning. And so we had, talked about having this like schedule of when, who was going to be hanging out with her. And then the other person would be not there. It's like so hard to remember now. It's like so foreign, but
Yeah.
even though it wasn't that long ago, it was a couple of years.
Mm.
Um, and that quickly went out the window. It kind of like the schedule with her didn't necessarily stick. I think maybe it did a little bit, but yeah,
Mm.
it was weird. And I did ask because the person who watches Cadley is
Mm-hmm.
like, it's a little in-home daycare, had just gone through it herself. So I kind of asked her about it, and yeah, reaching out to other people was so
Mm-hmm.
helpful around that limbo period. And then I
Mm-hmm.
would say it was probably a couple months into that. Yeah, then we went on this like big family trip and lived abroad for a month, but we specifically got a place with 3 bedrooms. So we each had our own. Um, and yeah, it was weird, but
Yeah. But it
you know,
sounds like you really embraced it, in the sense that you still went abroad as you had planned, but made it work for where you were in during the break. And there's two things you said, I think, that are so important for the listeners to understand. One is, you just said this was 2 years ago and I don't even remember. And I
right.
think that's really important, because when you're going through it, it is so challenging and confusing, and you're like, this isn't working. And so much of going through a divorce or separation is temporary, but it's so painful, and the experience is so real in the moment. It's really important to remember that this will move. This is not a temporary state. This is not a permanent state. This is really, really temporary. And so I love that reminder that you're giving people, that while I'm sure if we were talking when it was happening, it would be very real for you. Now it's faded. So I think that's hugely important for people.
Mm.
And I love that you asked for support. That's why I do all the work that I do. That's why I have this podcast, because I think that hearing about divorce and hearing about what it's really like and people who've moved through it to a better place is so essential to give you that ability to keep going. Because it's hard, right? It's hard in those moments where a lot of some of my clients will talk about, like, suddenly their ex-partner's like really nice to them, or does the thing that they've been wanting them to do forever. And you think, oh, should I really do this? Like, that takes so much energy to stick that out, what you've decided to do.
It does. And I feel, yeah, I mean, I think that, again, speaking to doubt, like it did come up a little bit, but really that feeling of saying, I need a break, not because of you, but because of me. And I need to figure out what I want and how to find joy in my life and own that, and show my daughter what it really means to follow your own desires and to put yourself first. Like, in that moment when I made that decision and asked for that, like, ownership of my own happiness, everything changed for me. Everything. And so I couldn't go back.
Exactly. Well, I wonder also, I mean, you're making the most amazing point that I love. I share this so often with clients, like, what are you showing your kid, right? Like, what if your kids came to you and was like, I'm not that happy in this relationship, but I'm sticking it out because I committed. What would you say to them, right? You'd say, oh no, love, follow your dream, right? So you gave Cadley like the most perfect model of that. And I wonder if saying it the way you did to your ex, if it also helped him be less defensive or less hurt. I mean, we don't know what his experience is, but the fact that you made it about you, I wonder if that helped with your communication.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And I honestly don't know if he knew that it was about me necessarily. I mean, I honestly don't even know what words I used,
Yeah.
But I do think it did. I don't want to speak for him, but knowing our conversations and what I know, I do think it took longer for him to realize I was serious, because not obviously, but we had relationship, scuffles, if you will, in the past. And, we met when we were 20 and had gone through cycles of being together and not. And so I think that it would have been really easy, or he probably thought we were going to get home and then things were just kind of going to go back into the routine of what's for dinner and who's getting the baby and da 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 da. But like I said, in that moment of choosing me, I couldn't go back from that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in a lot of ways, and I see this a lot, he was then separating from someone he didn't necessarily know, because this new you who was like, my needs matter, is not how you had been in the relationship.
Right.
So I always say, like, let's give our ex-partners a lot of grace, because we shifted and changed and they didn't know that was coming.
It's true.
Right? He expected you to act how you always did, which was probably in the past, take him back, let go, do it again. And so I have a lot of compassion for that.
Oh, for sure. And I don't actually, you would know more if people say this all the time. So my parents are divorced, and they were, the best and only, I would say, example of really putting kids first, having a good relationship, being friends. I mean, not that they'll I think they could go out and be fine, but not that they do, but, they traveled to Bolivia together for one of my weddings, they're really great. And I don't even know where I was going with that story, but, about if people say all the time that they are I am so grateful that it is him that I have to be connected to for the rest of my life, because we have a daughter together. And co-parenting, while not always a dream, has been pretty awesome. And, he's such an amazing dad. And yeah, so
that's
I'm
so
very
great
grateful in a lot of ways for all that.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that that your parents were divorced, because did you feel, some people talk about this, fear of getting divorced because your parents had been divorced?
Not really.
Good.
I
Maybe
think,
because they had showed you such a good model of it.
yeah, I think so. And, I kind of am speaking for him again, which, I shouldn't, but he has said to me, which I don't, maybe I shouldn't share this, but, just like his parents are also divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And so he always thought that he would be divorced, which is kind
Interesting.
of interesting. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it did allow you also to have maybe both of you have a little less of the shame that so many people bring to the divorce because you actually went through it. So it's interesting. What would you say, given the bravery it takes to go through a divorce, what would you say is kind of was the hardest part? The part that for me, it was like brings me to my hands and knees. I just feel kind of gutted. Do you recall that?
no,
Mm.
I feel, and not to say that there were never hard times. There definitely have been, or moments of any of that. Like, I don't want to undermine or say like, oh, like people are nuts for like feeling badly about divorce. Like, I get it, like all of that. And at the same time, for me, it was wonderful. I don't know how
Mm.
else to say it. Like, it really wasn't the
Mm.
bring me to my hands and knees. Like, yes, I felt feelings and cried, and it was always at a moment that I wasn't expecting, and it didn't
Mm-hmm.
really, I didn't have a thought process around it. I was just like, I need to let this out right now. Maybe, okay, I remember one time, which was it was post, maybe not official divorce, but it was like just a couple of months ago when I found, I'm going through boxes and trying to clean out stuff in my house, and I found like all of our wedding cards that people had sent us or given us for the wedding. And I am a recovering pack rat, so like typical me keeps everything. And so there was this moment, and I don't, maybe I had texted you about it too, but I
Mm-hmm.
texted a few people, and I'm just like, like, getting rid of stuff is already so hard for me, and thinking through, like, does getting rid of this stuff erase the importance of this decade of my life?
Mm.
Not that we were married for 10 years, but knew each other for 10, and moving through that, I would say was hard. But
Yeah, was painful. And I wonder also, Laura, if that maybe the bringing yourself in things that brought you to your knees might have happened more in the relationship, and that the ending of it maybe gave you the relief. That's
right,
my, yeah, right.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm so glad you bring up about, the physical memories and the remnants, because that's a whole other process. I have a client who I work with who just recently told me, I thought this was so smart. It's fall now. So they were switching clothes from, summer to winter for their son. And this is the first summer winter switch that they have two houses. And so it's a task that seems so innocuous, but it is so painful. And so I think it's really important to remember that these little moments pop up. So even if, right? And
Right,
sometimes
even
when
at the
least
end.
expect it.
Right,
Exactly.
for sure. Or
Yeah.
like not thinking through necessarily, it's like, oh, and then, okay, now the divorce is final. So, and the insurance period is coming up November 1st. So then navigating that, there's always a new layer. I mean, probably even without kids, but especially with kids, that it, we're going to be connected forever. So,
Right. I'm so glad you're bringing that up also, because it's making me think about, I talk to people a lot about the importance of anniversaries, just from like smells, all the senses, smells, sights, touch, that, remembering any first anniversaries, like the first time you're having holidays separate, but even every year, if it's the insurance, just being reminded of, oh, I'm not in this partnership anymore. And I always like to tell people to prepare for those things with talking to friends and doing great self-care, like knowing that they're coming. So I'm so glad you're bringing that up. So smart. So good.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's an interesting world to navigate. I will say that I think this goes back to one of your earlier questions. I'm not saying that I thought I would be divorced, but I feel like there was this moment of like, oh, I didn't think this was going to be my life. Like, but you know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure you know
Absolutely.
exactly
I
what I
think
mean.
exactly. Everybody
Yeah.
has that. And there's actually I will do a whole part in my program about um, working through and letting go of that fantasy of, because we
Hmm.
really have to let go of a whole picture that we had, even if we weren't or unhappy in the marriage. So yeah, it's such an important part of the healing process of divorce. So I'd like to know, what was the part of this whole experience that you could never see coming, but changed you for the better?
Oh, wow. That I could never see coming, but changed me for the better is really, I'm going to keep kind of talking about like choosing me
Mm-hmm.
was so important. Um, and really recognizing that I have to partner with myself first. And if that's not there, then any partnership that I create outside of that, and you know, there's that whole debate, I would say, about like you have to, you if you don't love yourself, then you can't love anybody else, or da 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 da. And then there's the other side of like, well, that's crap because we're all working on self-love, and that doesn't preclude us from
Mm-hmm.
having these deep relationships with other people. So it's in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, it's
Mm-hmm.
and both. And I just know that, yeah, if I have a great relationship with myself, I'm teaching Cadley to do the same, which is so important to me. And
Yeah. And are there things that you're doing in your life now because you put yourself first then? Like decisions that you make, or choices?
yeah, I would say that the first thing I did, and this was even while we were still living together, I think, the first thing I did was hire someone to come clean because that was always a big thing. So someone came to clean. I had
Mm,
meal prep. I like went through the whole gamut of different, like trying different meal deliveries and meal prep people to come.
mm-hmm.
I probably went a little wild with the spending because I was like, that was a big thing,
Mm-hmm.
was money. So I was just like, yep, nobody can tell me how to spend my money.
Right, right.
So, but and then in the day to day now, I would say I am still healing, and this still comes up. So I'm in a new relationship now, and I would say it still comes up, the needing to put myself as an important part of my life. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's already there, but also just like those constant reminders. And I will still get triggered around the money thing. Like if I make a purchase, I still have this feeling of like, oh, is he going to be mad about it? And then I have
Mm-hmm.
to remember, okay, he's not the same person as my ex. And I need to feel good with what I'm buying no matter what.
Right. So it sounds like being able to say what you need and connecting to what you feel has allowed you to have more awareness in your current relationship when you're being triggered, which is all we can ever give the people that we're in relationships with. We can't change 100%. We can only own when our shit gets triggered,
Totally.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. So it sounds like it gave you so much more self-awareness by making that decision to go through your divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And it's certainly given Cadley so much of having a mama who, believes in herself and puts her understands that she even has needs.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Just
for sure.
to think about the different kind of mom she would have had if you stayed.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
wild. So I'd like to ask people also okay, let me start this over. So I'd like to ask you, what message would you give your past self when you were just venturing down this path? So if you could go
Ooh.
back.
I would say it's worth it.
Mm.
It's worth it. And good job on getting support, I would say, as well. Because I didn't know you then, but I probably would have reached out to you, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I did reach out to my coach, and I knew that she had gotten a divorce when her son was about 18 months old, and Cadley at the time was 9 months old. So I reached out, and this was when like I didn't know what was going to come of it. I didn't know what was going to happen. I reached out and I was just like, I need to book a session. I don't know what I need, but I need support with this. And ended up investing a lot more than I thought that I was going to in this like 9-month coaching package, I believe. And honestly, we didn't talk about the divorce a lot. I mean, yes, she told me her experience and we talked through some of that, but we talked about business a lot. And yeah, it was so worth it to kind of get that perspective and to know what other people had done or had not done, and kind of figure that out for myself. So
yeah. So you would tell yourself it's worth it, and that to keep reaching out for support.
yes.
So important, right? And though, it's so easy to feel isolated, or that people don't understand you, or your situation is so unique.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And oh, I want to add to that about reaching out to the right kind of support, because even I will say there are people that had been divorced that were not supportive in the way that I needed. I'll just put
Absolutely.
it like that.
Absolutely. And I actually have in my ultimate divorce toolkit, which you can get on my website, drelizabethcohen.com, I have a whole cheat sheet on who to talk to and how to talk to people to get the support you actually need without feeling needy, because it's so important. You can really get derailed when you look for support from people who can't give it in the way that you need.
Right. Who are putting their emotions and their reactions and expecting you to hold them through your emotional process. And I love there's only been a handful of people, less than a handful. I can count them on one hand, if you will, of people, and you were one of them that you were like, "Can I say congratulations?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, you can." Like, this is such a good decision for me.
Yeah.
And there were only a few people who had that positivity around it, and that's really what I needed and wanted, and how I felt, to be honest. Like, that's why the brought you to your knees, and I get it, and I'm not saying everybody's situation is the same, and but I really felt very positive about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you were able to find people, even those handful of people, who could see that, because then they were really meeting you where you are. And that's a full circle of why you got the divorce. Like, it makes sense, because you needed to figure out what you needed, and that your needs mattered. And so that you need to continue that through the whole divorce process, having people who can really match where you are. I love that. So any messages that you would want to share with people, who are just at the beginning of a divorce and listening now to hear stories and understand what other people's experiences are? Any messages you'd want to share?
I would say along a similar line with the reaching out to the right support is I would follow everything that the wonderful woman that you're listening to, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, does, because truly so much out there about divorce is like painting this picture of like scariness, of difficulty, even like, so we didn't use lawyers for the divorce process. I'm kind of like that kind of person anyway.
So did you use a mediator or?
Nope. I just researched it myself. Wow. And the amount of confusing legal jargon that they put in this, which is like, it's really not that difficult of or it doesn't have to be, I don't believe, that difficult of a process. And they make it super confusing and like try to scare you. And obviously, it depends on the relationship. Like I said, I'm so lucky to have such an amazing co-parent who was willing to just do it ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
if we had needed a mediator, that would have been fine too.
Yeah.
I don't even know where I'm going with this, but essentially it doesn't have to be scary. And if you see things out there that say it's scary, like that's why, like I didn't look up articles really. Maybe I did a couple times, but then I was like, this is turning me off because I feel like this is not reflecting my experience.
Yeah. So what you're encouraging people to do, which I think is so important, is know that there is this positive divorce idea out there, that there are people like me and colleagues of mine who believe that this is a process that you can grow through and that it doesn't have to be scary. And it certainly doesn't have to be shameful.
Correct. Totally. Yeah. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be shameful. And even if you yourself are not feeling shame about it, which I hope that you're not, also know that that doesn't mean that you have to tell everybody at once. I would say that that was one thing that I was so grateful that my coach talked to me about around like, and this is true, divorce, non-divorce, anything in your life, right? There's like rings of truth of like, you need the first and foremost be the most honest with yourself and then going out from there, like you don't need to make a big announcement. Like I never posted about it on Facebook, like I told people when I was ready. And even my parents, I didn't tell them till 6 or 7 months after we were separated.
So you really let yourself process it and allowed it to be your news to share when you felt ready. I think that's so important and such a good message, Laura. I'm so glad you're saying this idea of giving permission to come into your life in this intimate way and not to just give that away to people. Right?
For sure.
It's kind of sacred information, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
And there are people who have not earned
it yet.
Yeah,
exactly. I love that.
Which does mean that sometimes, there are still people today that just assume, and I'm not offended by it. I'm just like, hey, guess what? That's no longer the case in my life.
Right. Oh, well, it's so beautiful to hear your story, Laura, and to hear about really that decision you made to put yourself first. And it's so brave. I call the women in my program super women because I really do think it's such bravery. It's easier sometimes to just go with what everyone's expecting. And when you do something against the grain like that, it's so brave. So thank you for sharing your story. And I am so glad I get to know you with all the colors of of your rainbow, that you're fully here and fully expressing all of yourself. So thank you for making that decision. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for all that you're doing for these rock star women.
Thank you.